Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The series begins with a group of people whose plane crashes on a tropical island with a high temperature. These people are trying to contact rescue teams to come and save them from the island. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a strange, terrifying creature, which is very large. The pilot sticks his head out of the window to try to see what the creature looks like, and the strange creature grabs the pilot and kills him in a brutal way. To understand what happened, let's go back to the beginning of the series. Jack, who is a doctor. Jack lying in a jungle. He gets up and starts running through the jungle until he reaches the beach, where he finds the plane crashed, and the people are scared and panicking. Jack starts treating the injured. After finishing, he takes a needle and thread and goes to an isolated place. He takes off his clothes to treat a wound he got from the plane crash. At this moment, he meets a woman named Kate, and he asks her for help, telling her to stitch the wound on his back. Kate starts stitching the wound. Saeed, who is lighting a fire so that if a ship passes by from afar, they will see them. At night, a woman named Shannon and her brother Boone, who brought her some biscuits to eat, but Shannon refuses to eat because she is waiting for the rescue team to arrive. At this time, Jack and Kate return to the beach, and Jack examined a policeman who was injured with a piece of shrapnel in his belly. Afterward, Jack told Kate that he needs to figure out which direction they're in so he can look for the plane's cockpit because that's where the transmitter is. In that case, they can send a signal to the rescue team. Kate then said to him that she saw smoke inside the jungle. While they were talking, they suddenly heard the sound of an animal coming from the jungle. The sound was terrifying, and everyone got scared and panicked because they didn't know the source of the sound. The following day, Jack went to Boone and told him that he's going to look for the cockpit and he takes care of the injured. Then Jack and Kate set off, taking a man named Charlie with them. On the way, the sky suddenly clouded over and it started raining, but they didn't mind and kept walking. They eventually reached the cockpit and managed to climb inside. They found the pilot, who was still alive. The pilot asked Jack how long it has been since the crash. Jack replied 16 hours. The pilot then told him that he changed the plane's course, so the rescue team is probably searching for them in the wrong place. The pilot then showed them where the transmitter was, but when they checked it, they found it wasn't working. At that moment, they heard a terrifying noise outside. They saw something strange moving past the plane. The pilot quickly went to the window to check, but suddenly, the strange creature dragged him out of the plane and killed him. Jack grabbed the transmitter and they all ran as fast as they could. However, Charlie fell, and Jack turned back to help him. Meanwhile, Kate waited for both Jack and Charlie. Suddenly, Charlie came alone. Kate asked him about Jack. Charlie replied that he pulled him up, and then he disappeared. Worried, Kate and Charlie went back to search for Jack. They found the pilot hanging from the trees. Moments later, Jack appeared, and they all returned safely. After that, a child named Walt, who was in the jungle, and he finds handcuffs there. Then Walt's father, Michael, comes, and Walt gives him the handcuffs. Michael realizes that there must be a criminal among them on the plane. Back at the beach, Syed gets into a fight with a guy named Sawyer. Sawyer accuses Syed, saying that because of him, the plane crashed. At that moment, Jack arrives and breaks up the fight. Michael gives the handcuffs to Jack and tells him there's a criminal among them. Kate tries to change the subject by telling them that they found a transmitter on the plane, but it was broken. Syed responds, he worked in communications. He'll try to fix it. Syed takes the transmitter, opens it up, and works on it for hours. He manages to get it working, but there's no signal. Syed and Kate decide to climb the mountain to get a signal. On their way, they hear the sound of an animal. Shannon gets very scared and starts screaming, causing the team to scatter in confusion. Suddenly, Sawyer shows up, fires at the source of the noise, and kills it. When they check, they discover it was a polar bear, but its teeth were much larger than a normal bear's teeth. The team begins to wonder how a polar bear ended up on a tropical island with such high temperatures. Syed then questions Sawyer where he got the gun. Sawyer replies he found it on one of the bodies. Kate immediately grabs the gun and empties the bullets because she doesn't trust Sawyer. A flashback to before the plane crash, and it's revealed that Kate is actually the criminal on board, and the man with the shrapnel in his body is the policeman, Jack, who pulls the shrapnel from the policeman's body. The officer wakes up and starts mumbling, asking about her. Jack doesn't understand what he's saying before the officer passes out again due to blood loss. Meanwhile, the team reaches the high point on the island, and Syed is able to pick up a signal, but it's a message in French. Luckily, Shannon knows French, so they ask her to translate. She deciphers the message and says it's a repeated message. The person says a number, then a French sentence. When she translates the sentence, it says that she's alone on the island. Asking if anyone hears this message, comes help her. The message then repeats with another number and the same sentence. Syed calculates the numbers and realizes the message has been playing for 16 years, meaning someone has been stranded on the island for that long. At the same time, the policeman regains consciousness and tells Jack to take out the picture in his pocket. Jack pulls out the picture and sees that it's of Kate, realizing she's the criminal among them. On the other side, the team decides to sleep in the jungle as night begins to fall. The next morning, the team returned, and Syed gathered everyone to tell them that they need to conserve food and water during this time. Kate approached Jack and told him about the message, and Jack realized that they were trapped on the island. However, he didn't mention anything to her about the picture he found. Later, Kate went to check on the policeman and saw that his condition was critical. She asked Jack to put the policeman out of his misery and end his suffering, suggesting this to get rid of the policeman once and for all. But Jack refused to kill him. That night, Sawyer went to the policeman and killed him to end his pain. Meanwhile, Syed tried to pinpoint the signal of the French message using the transmitter. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a fight between a man named Hurley and Sawyer because the food was running out, and Sawyer had been hoarding it for himself. The people realized that their food supply was depleting, causing chaos and panic. At this point, a man named John stepped in to calm everyone down. He told them they needed to hunt for food and pulled out a bag full of knives. John said he needs 2 men to come with him to hunt. Kate and Jack decided to join him. In the jungle, John heard the sound of an animal and separated from the group to locate it. When he was alone, the terrifying creature appeared in front of him, but John remained still, without running. The creature left him unharmed. Meanwhile, Jack went to speak with a woman named Rose. During their conversation, Jack noticed a person in the jungle and assumed he was hallucinating due to the psychological pressure. Kate and Michael returned on their own, and suddenly John reappeared, carrying a boar he had hunted. He didn't tell them anything about his encounter with the creature, a flashback to John's history. John had been in Australia for a trip, but he was rejected because he was paralyzed. The strange and terrifying thing is that when their plane crashed on the island, John found himself able to walk again, with his paralysis completely gone. The next morning, Jack wakes up and sees a mysterious man. He decides to follow him to find out what he wants. During this time, Claire faints due to the extreme heat, and the group goes to get water from the supply box, but they find that the water is missing. They can't drink seawater because it's salty. Everyone begins to suspect Sawyer, so Syed confronts him. Sawyer insists he didn't steal anything and has no idea where the water went. A flashback to Jack's past. He had been in Sydney to retrieve his father's body, which was being transported in a coffin on the same plane that crashed. Jack recalls seeing his deceased father, Christian, and it's revealed that Jack has been hallucinating. Later, at night, Jack is still in the jungle, continuing to hallucinate as he sees his father again. He follows the vision until he reaches a spring of clean, drinkable water. Next to the spring is a cave, and inside the cave, Jack finds wreckage from the plane as well as his father's coffin. Shockingly, when he opens the coffin, it is empty and the body is missing. Jack, overwhelmed, breaks the coffin in anger. Jack returns to the beach and tells the others that he found a spring of fresh water. He leads them to the spring. Meanwhile, it's revealed that a Korean man named Jin Soo had been stealing the water for himself and his wife, Sun, deciding to let the others fend for themselves. Back at the cave, Jack, Kate, and the others explore and find old skeletal remains, bones that have been there for many years. Jack suggests to Kate that they move the people to the cave for safety, but Kate believes staying by the beach is better, so that they can be seen by passing ships. That night, Jack takes some people to live in the cave, while others remain on the beach, hoping for rescue by ships. At dawn, Syed tells Kate that he has built a signal booster. He takes out 3 batteries and explains that they need to be placed in 3 different locations, forming a triangle, and they all need to be activated at the same time. Kate takes 1 battery, Syed takes the second, and Boone volunteers to take the third. Kate then goes to Sawyer and asks for fireworks to use as signals, ensuring that they all turn on the batteries simultaneously. Meanwhile, Charlie goes to the beach and asks Boone for help at the cave. Boone hands the battery to his sister Shannon and tells her to activate it when she sees the fireworks. Syed, who sets off the fireworks and waits for the others to activate their batteries. Shannon sees the fireworks and quickly activates her battery, and Sawyer does the same. As Syed turns on the device and begins to trace the signal, he is suddenly attacked. Someone hits him on the head, leaving him unconscious. The mysterious attacker disappears and no one still knows who this person is. The following day, Shannon's device goes missing, and it is revealed that she suffers from an illness that requires the device for treatment. Without it, she could die. Everyone suspects Sawyer. Syed used to work in the Iraqi army, torturing prisoners. Enraged, Syed captures Sawyer, ties him up in the jungle, and begins to torture him harshly. After the torture, Sawyer tells them he knows where the device is, but refuses to tell anyone except Kate. When they take him to Kate, Sawyer confesses that the device isn't with him. He was mocking them and wasting their time. Furious, Syed loses control and stabs Sawyer in the arm, nearly hitting an artery. Syed then quickly flees. Jack arrives just in time to save Sawyer, treating and bandaging the wound. After a while, Sawyer wakes up and sees Kate sitting beside him. She asks him what was inside the envelope he'd been carrying. Angered, Sawyer snaps, saying she doesn't know who he really is. Kate takes the letter and reads it, revealing that it was written by someone else named Sawyer. It's revealed Sawyer's real name is James, and the letter tells the tragic story of a con man named Sawyer who tricked James' mother into stealing money from her husband, promising they'd run away together. After his mother stole the money, Sawyer took it from her and abandoned her. When her husband found out, he killed her and then took his own life. James adopted the name Sawyer and began conning others, just as the real Sawyer had conned his mother. Meanwhile, Shannon is close to death, but Jinsu's wife, Sun, who has experience with natural remedies, comes to her aid. She applies a herbal paste to Shannon's chest, miraculously curing her. At the same time, Saeed is walking along the beach when he notices a wire buried in the sand. Curious, he follows the wire into the jungle, where he suddenly steps into a trap, hits his head, and falls unconscious. When Saeed wakes up, he finds himself tied to a bed and hears a woman's voice. The woman introduces herself as Rousseau, a French woman who turns out to be the person who sent the distress message they had received earlier. Rousseau interrogates Saeed about a girl named Alex. Saeed insists he doesn't know anything about her. Rousseau begins to torture him, demanding information, but Saeed explains that his plane crashed on the island, and he knows nothing about the place. Eventually, Rousseau confides in Saeed, telling him that she arrived on the island with her team, but they all died because of the others. She doesn't explain who the others are. Saeed, alarmed, asks if there are other people on the island. Rousseau tells him that she hasn't seen them, only heard their voices. Saeed realizes that Rousseau is mentally unstable and asks her to free him so he can return to his group. Rousseau warns him that the jungle is not safe and that the monsters are out there. She leaves to go hunting. Taking advantage of the moment, Saeed manages to free himself, steals Rousseau's maps and her weapon, and quickly escapes the place. After that, Claire was sleeping when she woke up to someone injecting her with a syringe. Suddenly, he disappeared. Claire started screaming for help, and Jack and the others came to her aid. They told her it was just a nightmare, but Claire insisted it wasn't a dream. It was real, and he tried to hurt her baby. Jack didn't believe her at first, but to calm her down, he took a flashlight and, along with Hurley, went to search the jungle. Hurley told Jack that they didn't know what was in the jungle, how many people were with them, or their names, so they needed to make a list. Jack began writing down everyone's names and information on a piece of paper. Boone saw him and said there was no need to write them down since the passenger list was with Sawyer. Hurley got the list from Sawyer. Meanwhile, Jack told Claire they had searched everywhere and found no sign of the person who injected her. He suggested that she might have been hallucinating since she was in her last month of pregnancy. Claire got upset and decided to leave the cave and return to the beach. When she stepped out, Charlie went with her to help. On their way, Claire began experiencing labor pains, prompting Charlie to run at full speed to find Jack. He saw a young man named Ethan and asked him to go get Jack. Ethan quickly left. At that moment, Saeed arrived at the cave, stating that he had found the person behind the French message. Hurley also showed up, struggling to catch his breath. He told Jack that he had gotten the passenger list from Sawyer and discovered that there was someone among them whose name wasn't on the list. Ethan, Jack, John, and the others ran into the jungle to search for Charlie and Claire. They gathered the remaining group so they wouldn't be alone in the jungle. They returned to see the tracks, and John noticed separate footprints. He realized that one set of prints was real, and the other was planted to mislead them. Ethan had left them to confuse the team. They decided to split up, with each person following a different track. Jack took Kate to follow a specific trail. Along the way, he found a piece of fabric that Charlie had been holding. He continued on the path as the sky began to darken and rain started to fall. Suddenly, Ethan appeared and attacked Jack and Kate, threatening that if they kept following him, he would kill one of the people he had taken. Jack stood his ground and tried to fight Ethan, but Ethan struck him hard, causing Jack to fall to the ground and lose consciousness. When Jack woke up, he searched for Charlie and found him hanging from a tree. Jack rushed to the ground and tried to revive him, but all his efforts were in vain. Kate told him to let go because Charlie was already dead, but Jack refused to give up. He kept performing CPR on Charlie, and suddenly, Charlie revived. They quickly took him back to the cave. At that moment, John and Boone were still searching in the jungle when they suddenly stepped on something solid. Boone began to dig and discovered a hard object that looked like a buried metal chamber. The following day, Kate met Sawyer in the jungle, where she heard a noise nearby. They followed the sound and came across a lake. They quickly jumped into the water and began swimming, feeling very happy. However, they were shocked to discover bodies submerged in the water, clearly belonging to people who had been on the plane. While exploring, they found a bag but couldn't open it because it was locked with a key. Sawyer decided to take the bag. That night, of course, Sawyer sneaked into the area and tried to steal the bag, but Sawyer woke up and took the bag from him. Sawyer then went to Jack and told him that she had found a police officer's bag in the lake, which contained 4 guns. She continued to explain that the key was in the officer's wallet. After that, Jack and the others decided to dig up the police officer's grave. They went to the officer's grave and began to unearth the wallet. Jack started looking through it but found no key. He then noticed her hand and saw the bag's key, telling her he knew 2 things about the wallet. The key belonged to the police officer. He got upset with her, left her, and went to Sawyer, demanding the bag. Sawyer refused. Jack told Sawyer that if he didn't give him the bag, he wouldn't provide the antibiotics he needed for his injury. Reluctantly, Sawyer handed over the bag to Jack, who then took it to Kate. They opened it to find money, weapons, and an envelope containing personal items. Jack realized the envelope belonged to her, and when he opened it, they found a toy airplane inside. They discovered that Kate had robbed an entire bank to get that airplane because it wasn't for someone she loved. In the following day, Syed tried to decipher something from the maps, but all his efforts were in vain since the maps were unclear. At that time, Michael approached them and suggested that they build a raft to escape from this place because he didn't want his child to grow up here. Meanwhile, John and Boone went to the location of the metal chamber and began digging. Later, Charlie started searching through Claire's bag to find her diary, while Claire was still held captive by Ethan. Charlie asked Kate about the diary, and she told him to search for it, as Sawyer was the one stealing everything. Charlie went to Sawyer and took the diary from him. After that, he returned to the cave and began reading it. He discovered that Claire had written about dreaming of the Black Rock, which reminded him of what Syed had said. Rousseau mentioned that the others had died after returning from the Black Rock. He rushed to tell Syed about this, who suspected that the maps pointed to the Black Rock. Charlie decided to go to the Black Rock immediately to rescue Claire, but Jin-Soo advised him to wait until morning when it would be light. At that moment, John and Boone were returning from the jungle when they saw Claire ahead of them. She had managed to escape from Ethan. John took her back to the cave, where Jack realized that she had lost part of her memory from when she boarded the plane, forgetting the crash and everything that had happened to her in the days that followed. When morning came, Syed expressed his concern to Jack and Charlie about Claire, as Ethan was strong and skilled. He wondered how Claire could have escaped so easily. Charlie, annoyed, left and headed toward the cave. Along the way, he saw Jin-Soo, the Korean man, when suddenly they heard a noise from the bushes. Jin-Soo was struck on the head by a rock, rendering him unconscious. Then Ethan appeared, angry, demanding to know where Claire was. He warned them that if they didn't return her by nightfall, he would kill them all. Charlie immediately rushed to tell Jack and John about everything that had happened. Jack insisted that they needed to confront Ethan, but John cautioned them, saying that Ethan was a professional and they didn't have the weapons to fight back. They decided they wouldn't hand Claire over. Instead, they gathered everyone and kept them in the cave, setting traps and securing the area while taking turns to watch. When night fell and morning came again, they were shocked to find one of their group dead. Jack resolved to kill Ethan and end the threat, but John warned him not to take risks since he was unarmed. Jack then looked in the bag and found the police's guns. He grabbed the weapons, and he, Charlie, and Syed decided to bring Sawyer in to join them. They took Claire with them to use as bait for Ethan and headed into the jungle. As darkness set in, each member took their positions. Claire wandered through the jungle when Ethan suddenly confronted her. The whole team emerged, armed, and they managed to overpower Ethan. However, it was revealed that Ethan surrendered, but Charlie pulled out his gun and shot Ethan. A flashback to time and Christian, Jack's father, before he died. He was at a bar where he met with Sawyer, and they talked. Christian mentioned a group of people called the Red Team. After their conversation, Sawyer received a message saying that the person who deceived his mother was in Sydney. Sawyer immediately went to Sydney and killed that person. Afterward, he realized that this individual wasn't the one he was really looking for. Now back to the island, where Sawyer decided to return the gun to Jack after they managed to kill Ethan and eliminate the threat. He approached Jack and handed him the gun. Jack joked, saying that's why the Red Team has never won a game. Sawyer then recalled Christian's words and asked Jack what he meant. Jack explained that it was a phrase his father always said. Sawyer realized then that Christian was Jack's father, but he said nothing and left. Next, Michael working on his boat, which was almost finished. However, the boat could only accommodate 4 people: Michael, Walt, Sawyer, and 1 empty spot. Michael planned to set sail on a new day. That night, Michael woke up to find his boat burned, and they lost hope of escaping. He became suspicious of Jin-Soo and went to Sun, asking her about her husband. Sun went looking for Jin-Soo in the jungle and found him in a cave with his hand burned. She was convinced he was the one who burned the boat, but Jin-Soo insisted he was trying to put the fire out. Feeling unheard, Jin-Soo decided to escape because no one believed him. He hid in a secret place, but Sawyer found him and brought him back to the beach. The others began to beat Jin-Soo mercilessly, but John intervened, stating they were on a deserted island and needed to focus on survival instead of killing each other. They eventually agreed with John's reasoning. Later that night, John approached Walt and asked why he had moved his father's boat. Walt explained that he wanted to stay on the island because he liked it there. At this point, Jin-Soo, the Korean man, is innocent. The following day, Jin-Soo went into the jungle to gather wood. While he was collecting it, Michael noticed that Jin-Soo wanted to build a boat, so he decided to help him. They started working together and decided to search for a battery to power the transmitter to take with them on the boat. They went to Syed and mentioned that he said Rousseau had batteries. Syed told them he didn't know where she was and that the map was unclear, so he gave them the maps. The maps contained repeating numbers, and Hurley recalled that he had won a lottery with those same numbers. Hurley decided to take the map without anyone knowing and set out to find Rousseau to learn more about the numbers. He left at dawn and ran until he reached her location. When he found Rousseau, he asked her about the numbers. Rousseau explained that when they were on the ship with the exploration team, they heard those numbers on the transmitter, so they landed on the island to figure out what they meant, but they ended up getting trapped. Now, back to the numbers, Hurley had won a large amount of money and bought a big house, a car, and a restaurant. He also planned to buy a factory, but unfortunately, his grandfather died, the factory manager committed suicide, and a missile struck his restaurant. His troubles didn't end there, and the police arrested him on drug charges. Hurley realized that the numbers were a curse and that they were responsible for the plane crash. Rousseau believed him, and they embraced, feeling reassured because she believed his words. She gave him a battery and let him go, and Hurley returned to the group and shared what he found. Now, the iron room that John and Boone found. They had been digging around it, and they noticed the same numbers written on it. John and Boone kept trying to open it by various means, but all their efforts were in vain, so they returned to the cave and went to sleep. That night, John dreamt of his mother, who was pointing at a tree. At the same time, he saw a plane crash on the island, so he woke up and took Boone with him to search for the spot he saw in his dream. He found a cross, but John started having trouble walking, and Boone suggested they return to the cave. John then told Boone that he used to be paralyzed before they came to the island, and that the island had magical qualities, so they had to continue their search. They pushed on, and suddenly, John spotted the plane from his dream. Boone climbed onto the plane and found a working transmitter. He started talking to people, asking for help, but they couldn't hear him. Just then, the plane began to crash. John emerged from the plane and saw Boone unconscious, so he carried him on his shoulder and rushed back to the cave. Jack began treating Boone, while John went back to the iron room and started banging on it, yelling that he had done everything it wanted. At that moment, a light shone from the room. Meanwhile, Jack was trying to save Boone, but unfortunately, all his efforts were in vain, and Boone died. At the same time, Claire gave birth to her baby and named him Aaron. The following day, Jack was sure that Boone was dead because his injuries were unusual. He went to John to ask him what happened, but Kate followed him and calmed him down. After that, they held Boone's funeral. During the funeral, John spoke to the people about the plane they found, while Jack was angry and agitated. He confronted John and started hitting him, but the others quickly intervened and pulled Jack away from John. After the funeral, Shannon went to Syed and told him that John was the one who killed her brother and that she wanted a gun to kill him. Syed refused and went to John, asking him to take him to the plane he mentioned. John led him to the plane, and Syed checked it out, discovering that it had crashed years ago. John then confessed to Syed that he hit him that day when he turned on the transmitter. Syed got angry and pulled out his weapon, but John told him that the island wanted something from them, and they needed to figure out what it was before they left. Syed eventually agreed. The following day, John took them to the iron room. Jack was frustrated and asked why John was keeping it a secret. John explained that he wanted to open it and see what was inside. Syed pointed out that the door had no handle or lock, which meant that whoever built it didn't want anyone to open it. Therefore, they should bury it and not open it. However, John disagreed, saying that if they opened it, they might find useful things. Meanwhile, they were finishing the boat, but suddenly Michael started experiencing severe stomach pain and couldn't bear it. Jack examined him and noticed that Michael's water bottle was contaminated, realizing that he was suffering from poisoning. However, his stomach eventually calmed down, and Michael got up to continue working on the boat. At that moment, Walt approached John and told him that he didn't poison his father. John replied that he already knew that. At that moment, Walt became anxious and scared, pleading with John not to open the iron room before running away. Shannon, who confessed to Jack that she poisoned Michael. She explained that she didn't mean to poison him. She wanted to poison her husband, Jin-Soo, so he would stay with her on the island and not leave her alone. Jack told her to let Michael go to get help. Afterward, They finished the boat and decided to rest before setting off in the morning. The following day, Rousseau came to the beach armed and told them that others were coming. She began to share her story, revealing that she arrived on the island 16 years ago while pregnant with a girl. After giving birth, she named the girl Alex. A week later, she saw black smoke, and suddenly people came and took her daughter away. She looked at Claire and warned her that they were coming to take her baby too. Everyone was shocked by this revelation. Jack, however, seemed uninterested in her words and suspected she was mentally unstable. He instructed the others to get the boat ready so they could leave. But then Jack saw the black smoke and began to believe Rousseau's story. He approached her and took her to the room they found earlier to use it as a shelter. Rousseau, however, didn't recognize the room. Jack then had an idea and asked her for explosives. Rousseau told him there were bombs at the Black Rock, so Jack prepared to go there. Before leaving, he went to Sawyer to give him a weapon, as Sawyer was among those who would go to the boat. Sawyer shared with Jack that he had met a man in the bar named Christian, who mentioned having a conflict with his son and wanted to apologize but was too cowardly to confront him. Jack began to cry, thanked Sawyer, and left with a large group of people, including Rousseau, heading toward the Black Rock. On their way, they heard the strange creature's sounds. Rousseau informed them that the creature was the island's security system. Meanwhile, Jin-Soo, Michael, Walt, and Sawyer boarded the boat and left the island. Jack and his group, who waited for the sound to disappear before continuing their journey. They eventually arrived at the Black Rock, which they discovered was an old ship. Rousseau parted ways with them, and Jack and his team entered the ship, retrieving a box of explosives. At that moment, Rousseau returned to the beach and asked about Said. Charlie decided to go look for Said, while Rousseau stayed with Claire, who suddenly remembered her past when she was kidnapped and recognized Rousseau as the woman who attacked her. After that, Charlie returned to find Claire unconscious and the baby missing. Charlie and Said then went into the jungle to search for them. At the same time, Jack and the team carried the explosives and exited the Black Rock. Suddenly, they heard the monster's roar, and panic set in as the creature began to attack. It grabbed John by the leg as he struggled to crawl into a deep hole. Jack held onto John's hand, but John insisted that he let go. Jack refused, instructing Kate to place the bomb in the hole. She did so, and when the bomb exploded, the creature released John, allowing them to pull him to safety. Afterward, the team went to the metal room and positioned the bomb at the door. Meanwhile, Charlie and Said found Rousseau and asked her where she had taken the baby. She explained that she intended to give him to the ones who took her daughter in exchange for the return of her child, Alex. However, they took the baby from her and left. On the other side, Sawyer was on the boat, using a location tracker. He noticed that another ship was nearby, and as he signaled for help, the second ship spotted them and began to approach. Back with Jack, before they detonated the explosives, Hurley saw the numbers on the metal room and began to shout for them not to blow it up. John ignored him and triggered the explosion, causing the room to open. They ventured inside and discovered a very deep tunnel. Meanwhile, a small boat with a group of people approached, and they demanded to take the boy, Walt. However, Michael refused to hand over his son. At that moment, Sawyer drew his weapon, and suddenly, the boat's occupants detonated explosives on Michael's ship and took Walt with them before escaping. In the end, the events remained unknown. The Season 1 ends here. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification